think this was the last one we got to on Friday. We have definitions for conceit. And again, it's just an extended metaphor. What makes it a little bit different from simply saying extended metaphor, it's a rather unusual extended metaphor, or one that you wouldn't really expect there to be. Sometimes the relationship between the two, the idea that you're presenting in the metaphor, it might be a little bit strained, so you have to go into a little bit more of an explanation. So therefore, it ends up kind of taking over the whole passage or poem, whatever it is that you're taking a look at. These last couple, I'm going to go through kind of quick. I'm not going to worry about the songs, just so we can finish it and move on to the next thing. So, whole idea, again, I think we did touch on this base with this on Friday. You're just getting a little bit more sophisticated, better understanding of everything that it is you're taking a look at. So ghost was the example we had. Apostrophe. No, it's not the mark of punctuation. I'm not trying to insult you with that. It's spelled the same. It says it's said the same way, but it's a different type of literary thing that's going on. So it's not an apostrophe such as a contraction or an ownership, but it's actually a time when you would address someone or something that literally is not there. You could be studying for your figurative language quiz on Wednesday. You're going through the notes. You're getting frustrated. You can't figure out the one. You go, Mr. Kane, why are you doing this to me? You just did apostrophe. You spoke to a person who was not there. Now, if I was standing next to you while you said that, then it's no longer apostrophe. But I'm not going to be standing next to you at your house while you're doing figurative language. Maybe in the classroom, I'll be standing next to you. It could be a positive thing that's taking place. Say you had a loved one, grandparent, or something that passed away at when you were a younger age, and you still draw strength from that relationship. If you were to say or acknowledge grandma or grandpa, something like that, that would still be apostrophe. If a person were to say a prayer to any kind of religious figure, deity, that would be a form of apostrophe. You're speaking to someone or something that literally is not right there in front of you. So the nursery rhyme, little song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, I don't think you sing that before you go to bed. Maybe you do. You would technically be doing apostrophe because you're talking to a star that you're not physically right in front of having a conversation with. So it could be religious, it could be someone who has passed away, it could be aggravation where a person is just not close by, but anytime you call out to someone not there, generally there's some kind of intense emotion that's being held that can no longer be held back. That's going to be a form of apostrophe. All right. Questions for that one? George? No. Okay. Did you read Romeo and Juliet last year? Some of you did. The famous line, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? That would be apostrophe because she doesn't realize he is necessarily there the first time, when she first starts to say it. Remember, if there's any definitions that you still need to go over, Google Classroom, we got the presentation up there. George, you good? Okay. All right, and then the last one we're going to look at. Luke, no offense, I feel like you're going to have a question about this one. Because it kind of goes along with antithesis and paradox a little bit, which you were talking about on Friday. What's the difference? Oxymoron kind of tends to be like that because it's also a contradictory set of words. The kind of the cliche one that people will still talk about. Anyone know oxymoron? If you're at Red Lobster, you might order a platter of, you might get lobster. I'm thinking the shrimp, not lobster. Jumbo shrimp is kind of like the cliched oxymoron. Jumbo meaning large, shrimp we kind of take as meaning small, even though we're talking about a food. So it's a set of words. Antithesis, remember, you had at least a set of two sentences, two ideas in parallel form that contradict one another. Paradox is at least a sentence, a phrase that contradicts one another. This is two words that would contradict one another. So it kind of works its way down to simplest terms. oxymoron just being the two words. Take your time, but be quick about it. Not really an oxymoron, but that idea. If you don't get something, someone might say, I'm clearly confused. Logan, what are your eyeglasses made out of? Well, like your frames.
Oh. Not glass. Metal, maybe?
I don't know, are they?
Yeah.
So yours are metal? Okay. Yours look like they're plastic. So what are they?
Plastic.
Well, this part's plastic.
Plastic
This
glasses.
part's metal.
So you have glasses, but they're made out of plastic. It can be a little bit of oxymoron to it. So those are all kind of like types of oxymorons that come up. Generally, you tend to have words that have double meaning because when we say glasses, it's not just literally glass, but also something that you can see with. The famous biker gang in California in the 1960s, Hell's Angels, you have an oxymoron going on there. So, holy war, act naturally, found missing, the life-saving cemetery, those would all kind of be examples of oxymorons that would be taking place. So if there is an area, if there's some terms that I think might be a little bit tricky to keep track, keep straight, it could be oxymoron, antithesis, and paradox. Plus, I would also think just make sure you're clear as the difference among alliteration, assonance, consonants. But those are the grand total of the 11 that we're going to be doing for Wednesday. And the idea is we'll keep coming back to these over and over throughout the course of the year. Any questions about any of them? Good, good, good. All right. Now, the plan for today, which we're going to do, is to take a look here at Oedipus Rex. Tomorrow when you come in, there's going to be a packet for you to pick up, and that is going to be Oedipus Rex. I don't think we're going to start reading it tomorrow. Probably going to take a look at it Wednesday would be my guess. It's basically going to be the main unit that we're going to be focusing on for much what we got rest of August and then going into September. What we're going to do today, tomorrow, is just kind of go over some background for what's going to be happening with it. So, in your notebook, you got notes section, figurative language. What's going to work best for you, you kind of decide. I'd start a new piece of paper and go into Oedipus Rex and Sophocles. This is the playwright I'll tell you about here in a little bit. But it would be a separate note section that would be in the note part there of your notebook. Tommy? Yeah. Just take the hall pass. It's over there behind Alex. Anybody know what Rex stands for? Go to the museum, Brontosaurus, Stegosaurus, which dinosaur do most of the kids like to take a look at? Tyrannosaurus Rex, king of the dinosaurs. So Rex literally in Greek is king. So we're basically taking a look at King Oedipus is the other title that we also will get used for the play. But Oedipus Rex, Luke, you said you want to be king. Okay. Call you Rex. Rest of the way. Rex, Luke. I can handle that. And then Sophocles, of course, is the author, playwright of this, who we're going to start going into a little bit of detail with now. You can kind of summarize this a little bit if you want when it comes to, oh, come on, there we go. When it comes to the notes, or if you want to go word for word, it's up to you. Just so you are aware, the setup for this, we're going to start reading the play on Wednesday. We'll pick parts and just kind of go through it. It's going to take us probably a couple weeks with some stuff that we're going to be doing. When we do our essay and quizzes and tests and all that kind of stuff, when we do get to the test itself is certainly going to be about the play. It's also going to be about the background for what's going on with it. So certainly would be something you want to be aware of. Because do you need paper? Okay. Sophocles. He has been dead for about 2,500 years at this point. In his lifetime, he wrote a grand total of 123 plays. We only have 7 of them left. Three of them are a trilogy, Oedipus Rex being one of those from that trilogy. Probably his most famous play of all the ones that he wrote. So he's written 123 that we're aware of, but only 7 are still in existence. That seems like a really small number because it is, but when it comes to ancient Greek playwrights, and really plays kind of start with the ancient Greeks, there are 3 ancient ones that most people think of, or we only have plays from 3 of them. And so the fact that we do have 7 from Sophocles is still a pretty big deal. The way that this would work, there was a holiday that would celebrate the god of the grape harvest, which is Dionysus, and they would basically do a big celebration in Athens, which is the capital, the main city of Greece, and ancient Greece at the time. And they would do a yearly contest to see who is the greatest playwright. There is money involved with it. There's also a lot of reputation and fame, so people certainly wanted to become the winner, and then you would get to perform your play, certainly in front of big crowds. And this is the main form of entertainment that would be taking place at that time. You're not going to have movies around at that point, let alone TV. So for folks to kind of have entertainment, the play was the way they would go. Sophocles becomes a big deal because he defeats, when he is 28, the best-known playwright at that time, and that is his run. He's not 24-time champion so far as consecutive years, but he wins the yearly contest 24 times over about a 55 to 60 year span. His exact birthday and the day that he dies are not known to the date, but most look at him at being about 90 or 92 when he dies, and he was writing for about 60 of those years. So for 60 years, he won 24 times. That's a pretty good ratio to have. So certainly well known for the plays that he would write. The first time he won, it was a little bit of a surprise because he beats a guy by the name of Aeschylus. Aeschylus, Euripides, and Sophocles are the oldest known Greek writers that we have documents for. Aeschylus was the leading playwright of the time, so he had the stature of like a William Shakespeare. If you go back to Elizabethan era, if you're taking a look at modern U.S., he'd kind of be like a Steven Spielberg, Quentin Tarantino kind of type. And so you basically have this nobody, Sophocles, who shows up and beats him at his own game when it comes to being a playwright. So that certainly elevates Sophocles to pretty famous stature. Most of the plays that he writes tend to be tragedies, which we'll get into some details about those. But you're dealing with some kind of tragic character. So there's a character who has some kind of flaw, that causes him to have a fall or lose some things, whether it be power, fame, fortune, things along those lines. But most of the plays end up being tragedies. And the whole hope is that you are able to teach a lesson, learn something from reading it, so that you don't replicate, have the same issues, downfalls that the main character or characters in the play ended up having. Mentioned too, he writes more than 120, about 123, and as I said, only 7 of them are still around today.
How many total plays did you write?
That we know of, 123. Easy number to remember, 1, 2, 3. This sounds silly, but Sophocles is a big deal when it comes to theater because his plays are the first time that you will have more than 2 characters on stage. So before then, I don't want to call it primitive, but the style is just a little bit different, where either it'd be by yourself, monologue, soliloquy kind of stuff, or conversation between me and Melissa, but the whole idea that someone else would be on stage with the 2 of us was mind-blowing too. Not really big backdrops. You're not going to have major scenery or anything like that behind you. His actors, and they would all be actors, they wouldn't be actresses, so males would be playing the female parts. You had the same thing happen in Shakespeare's era. But the actors would wear large masks. So if you were sitting up in the cheap seats, you'd be able to take a look at a character and you would know if happy, sad, king, queen. You see like little logos for plays. You tend to have those 2 masks where one is smiling, one is frowning. They're kind of taking that from this era where if Tommy's in a good mood, there'd be a big smile. If Jillian was in a bad mood, there'd be a scowl on her face or something like that. All right. And mentioned to you this whole third actor thing down here at the bottom. Things that he's concerned about. And this would be like topics that would be showing up within his plays. He's a pretty philosophical guy where he's kind of worried about what is an individual's role or place within the whole world. So he's one of those people who would kind of be doing that. What's the meaning of life? What's my role in life? How do I go about finding happiness and things like that? He tends to do a lot of moral lessons against people who have either too much pride or have religious indifference. Now, keep in mind, he is writing his plays. We're going back into like mid 4th century BCE, so this is a long time ago. So it's not, Christianity, Judaism, any of those kind of religions that he's taking a look at, but we're talking about gods, Zeus, Hera, Athena, those people who we'll get into and talk about if we need be. You're not getting a huge lesson on name all the gods, remember what they're in charge of or anything like that, but they're certainly going to show up within the course of the reading, and we'll talk about them as we need to. But so far as morality, what it means to exist, what's our role within those things, that's something that he's taking a look at. So if a person is too conceited, has too much pride, that's probably going to be an issue, a downfall that a character might have. Mention to you things that he would add to Greek drama, Greek theater, which still certainly gets used today. He introduced the idea of having a third actor. Before that, it was all pretty much two or just one, the idea of used masks. There's not elaborate sets that would be taking place, but there still would be some that would be existing behind a person. And then there's also this thing called a chorus, which gets used in the plays, and I think it's probably one of the parts that people get confused about when we read it. We'll go into the setup here in a little bit. But there is, in most of his plays, this one included, there's going to be a character named the Choragus, who is basically the leader of the chorus. The chorus is a group of characters who would kind of chant and sing. I'm not going to make you do that if you end up being a member of the chorus. But you would have the action take place. If people are watching a scene unfold in real life, cafeteria, hallway, outside of school, what do people end up doing usually about things that they see happen amongst themselves? I see Alex say something mean to Zelena. I see Zelena punch Alex in the face. What am I then going to do? Some will just watch. What did you say? Laugh. Or cry.
Record it.
Then I could keep that moment with me forever. Or what would happen if someone records it?
They get in trouble.
Well, possibly. Does it usually just stay on like that person's phone? It tends to disseminate and go out all over the place. So what happens? People start talking about it. What the chorus does, I don't want to call them the gossipers, but they're basically the people who talks about what just happened. So if we're having Ben and Logan acting out on stage, they have their conversation. The chorus then throws in their 2 cents about it. So you kind of get an idea of what is the public opinion. It's kind of like the first Twitter poll that would be taking place where they're just giving you an idea about what they thought that they just saw. So the chorus kind of gives you that every person kind of viewpoint into things. And if they like a character, then they're probably going to be on his or her side. If they dislike a character, they go against them. So one thing that you keep an eye on while you read a play, what is the chorus's viewpoint on the action that's happening? But it gives you a sense as to what the average person would kind of be thinking about. Please do not draw the Greek theater, but this is an old-time Greek amphitheater. The stage would be right here, just a big, long stage. It's not coming into the crowd or anything like that, and people would just be walking or watching from the semi-bowl. So if you're sitting up here and you got 2 little people talking down there, that's why you need the masks and all that kind of stuff to better figure out what is happening. All right, this part you do need to write down because it's going to be the structure that we're going to be following along with so that you can kind of figure out how the play is going to be set up because it is a little bit different than just going act 1, scene 1, and stuff like that. The first part of the play is called the prologue. All traditional Greek plays have a prologue. It's kind of like pre-chapter 1 thing that would be taking place. And a lot of books will have a prologue before the actual action starts to take place. What the prologue does is it essentially sets the scene for you so the audience knows what's going on. So if it's a historical play, they would let you know, hey, this is the year, these are the events that are happening. When we take a look at it, we're going to have a prologue, and it's basically going to let us know that the city of Thebes, which is an imaginary city, but you could kind of imagine it being a large city, kind of like Athens in Greece at the time, that the city in Thebes is in trouble. There is famine taking place, almost kind of like a plague. People are sick, people are hungry, just kind of coming out of war. There's a lot of concern taking place, so that you kind of have a better idea as to what the mood is. But the prologue basically lets you know what is happening. Certainly in some films you watch, before the actual live action starts, you get a little bit of credits or text showing up on the screen, letting you know what's going on. That would essentially be the equivalent of the prologue. After the prologue, you have this thing here called the paradis. The paradis is a song sung by the chorus where they're kind of giving their own 2 cents about what's going on. There's an aisle on each side of the theater that the chorus comes in from. That aisle is called the paradis, and that's why this part kind of gets that name. But it's the first time that you see the chorus. They kind of come in, give their little 2 cents, and then you get into the actual action of the play that'll take place. Sorry to say, most Greek plays, you're not going to have like big battle scenes or anything like that. The action is spoken word, and they might be kind of telling of something that happened almost in flashback form. But the cast isn't simply large enough that if there were a battle to take place, you'd have 20 people on one side, 20 people on the other, and all of them starting to run into each other. Jillian, half the time you take notes, I'm going to be in your way. So you'll just go like this. I know. But thank you for noticing. You also have to look around Lou's head.
I do.
He tends to move around quite a bit as well. Melissa is right there.
One quick question about your schedule.
Good. Then we have scenes that are going to be taking place. Scenes generally are going to be the action of the play, what we would kind of expect it to be. So we're going to have a prologue, then there's going to be a paradox. Wow, that really was a quick question. There's going to be the paradox, and then you're going to go into the scenes where your actual characters take place. The scenes alternate with the thing called an ode. Ode is when the chorus kind of comes back and then gives their take on everything that happened. So you kind of get a sense if they are in favor of something that occurred, if they are disliking a character, but it's a lyric poem that they kind of sing back and forth to one another so you get an idea of what's going on. Plays, especially Greek plays, I'm not going to give you as a homework assignment and go, okay, take this home and read it, because I think people are going to kind of get confused with it. So, well, not because the idea behind it is so complex, but just seeing these words with odes and scenes, parados, prologue, and things like that. So we'll take a look at it in class, and we'll probably stop every couple minutes and just go over, all right, what is happening, what's going on, what do we know about characters and things like that. So the critical thing is if you get confused or you have a question, make sure that hand goes up in the air so that we can try to explain it and make sense of it. Chances are if you have a question about something, there's probably at least another half dozen people in here who are going to have a very similar question. Adam, you got 5 days this week. Can you handle that? It's a 5-day week. You had 3 days last week. This is a Monday through Friday. going to be September at the end of the week. Whole month unbeatable. You flinched a little bit. You might close the door. Just grab it. Thank you. The last part then that we have is what's going to be called the Exodus. So you have the prologue at the beginning, then you have the Exodus, which ends with the chorus giving their final idea, their final lines as they end up exiting the scene. So they kind of give their last 2 cents about everything that has just unfolded at that point. So prologue, paradis, you have the scenes, odes, which kind of alternate. I'll give you one last list here in a little bit. And then you get to the Exodus, which is the very last concluding part. Exit, Exodus, words certainly sound similar. That's where that concept's coming from. Logan, what's next period? So you would rather go to social studies than stay here?
Social studies is pretty
It's pretty weird. What's wrong with you?
I'd rather say.
Walking?
Then why did you get ready to?
I don't know. If I wouldn't go to the class,
That's probably a true statement.
You just need to push it on.
yeah, I can't wait.
Tyler, would you rather go to social studies than stay here? That's okay. We accept each other.
I'll wait. This is bad.
All right, this part you do not need to write down because we've pretty much gone over all of it, but you can just kind of see the setup as to how it goes. Prologue, parados, scene 1, ode 1, so action, response, more response. Most of the time you are dealing with 4 scenes. You might get some examples that'll be a little bit longer, and then you have the Exodus there at the very end. So it's going to be an alternating thing. They'll just kind of be going back and forth. Some scenes are going to be longer than others. Others are quite short. The odes are very brief because you have all the action unfolding in the scenes, and then you're just getting that little commentary about it before moving on to the next thing. So that part is not a big, long thing at all. A couple things I want to go over here so far is Greek culture and values, which is important to kind of understand what's going on. Mentioned there's some concern about religious beliefs and things like that. One of Sophocles' criticisms of the people of his society is that they're not necessarily religious enough. Religion is extremely instrumental in Greek life, and that whole idea of fate is really important. If something bad happens, take for example the horrific flooding that we have down in Houston, in Texas. If you were living in ancient Greece, what would be the reason for the flood? The gods are unhappy. Someone, something is not going right, so there's some kind of punishment that would be taking place. So if something bad is taking place, like a famine, like a war, that means there's a reason. It essentially boils down to someone's fault, and we got to figure out who that is. So Greeks were pious in the sense that they were supposed to be at least following their gods and look up to them. There is predestination in that concept of fate. If you are a shepherd, you were meant to be a shepherd. If you're a king, you were meant to be the king. If you are the town beggar, that's the way it was always supposed to be and the way that it always will be. So there's not that whole lot of changing who you are. We will use that concept, I'm in control of my own fate, especially when it comes to like athletics and postseason. Are you going to make the playoffs? Well, we're in charge of our own fate. The Greeks would go, no, you're not. The gods up there, they're the ones who are in charge. So if you try to get out of your fate, that would be a big issue that they would be taking a look at. So within this role of drama being the plays, this becomes an important part. Civic life basically is going to mean your civil duty, your role as a citizen. Theater is part of the celebratory part of this, but it's also a very important part to that religious ritual that would be taking place. So if you are a successful playwright, you have a high place in society. You're not a priest, but you're still a very important part of a religious kind of ritual experience that would take place. So the focus of the drama, it's not going to be silly comedies and things like that, but it's going to be taking a look at important issues, human suffering, responsibility, free will, whether you have it or not, limits of knowledge, things along those lines. Still meant to be entertaining, but there's supposed to be an important issue, message that is coming across with it. some social political beliefs taking place. Thebes is what's referred to as a city-state. We have Pittsburgh City, we have Pennsylvania State. Thebes, Athens, these places would kind of be like their own. You have a city that's also kind of governs itself. You're probably looking at large walls where if you have people from other cities coming in, there could be a little bit of a dispute taking place. Each city-state has its own king, own form of government, and all of that kind of stuff with it. So there is a closeness that's going to take place and kind of a communal living that's going to take place because you're not going to be traveling a whole lot from one city-state, one area to another. So the cores that we mentioned about earlier, the ones who are kind of given their 2 cents about everything that they see, they would represent the elders, more of the wise people, but also giving that community's attitude toward whatever has taken place within the play. So it gives you, again, as I mentioned, a good sense as to how would the average person be taking a look at it. But the layout is going to be a little bit different than what we normally would have. Last slide we'll take a look at today. Some concepts that are going to be in Greek tragedy. Dramatic irony is going to be a very important one. There's a lot of different types of irony. Dramatic irony doesn't just mean it's irony that occurs in drama, in a play, but the main thing is if you have dramatic irony, you have an audience who knows something that the character does not. You have a ton of dramatic irony taking place in this play because Sophocles is not introducing a new story with Oedipus Rex. It's a tale that a lot of people already know. And we'll kind of talk about those parts as we go through. So if you've ever been in a situation where you know something that other people do not, that would be kind of like a form of dramatic irony. In 10th grade, we used to read the play Julius Caesar, historical play about Caesar from Rome. What happens to Caesar? He gets stabbed. Everyone, 33 times, everyone who would be reading the play would know that that was going to happen at some point, except for the character of Caesar. So that's where that dramatic irony happens. If you're watching if you're watching a movie and the unsuspecting person opens the door, walks down the dark stairwell, there's creepy music in the background, you have a pretty good sense that something bad is going to be taking place. That would be dramatic irony. A term that we're going to be using quite a bit is going to be hubris. Hubris means you have excessive pride, so a lot of arrogance taking place. And when you're dealing with tragedy, you're dealing with downfalls, pride, a lot of, not necessarily greed, but certainly arrogance can be an issue that people are going to be dealing with. So we'll talk about those things a little bit more tomorrow. When you come in tomorrow, at your seat is going to be your vocab lists that I looked over. It's not quick. Vocab lists are going to be sitting at your seat. It'll be out of 10 points. You'll have the value on there for you. They go back into your notebook. That's going to be your main study guide then that you're going to be using for Friday's vocab quiz. Don't forget, don't get confused with Wednesday. You're having figurative language quiz. That's going to be the terms that were on the notes that we finished up today. You do have Quizlet links if you want to use them on Google Classroom, under the vocab area. Just go there, go through the flashcards, probably help you better remember those things. That would be something to certainly take a look at. The vocab lists, they'll be waiting for you. You pick them up, put them back in the notebook, and basically your study guide for what you're doing.
I got my remind text.
I think you gave me a thumbs up, too. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I said you got a thumbs up, cool piece of
Too early in the year to go for the heart. Maybe by October we'll be getting some hearts.